And welcome back, guys. It's Rath again with another edition of the Rath Learning Curve here at rotocurve.com. This time bringing you the NFL Learning Curve and the GOAT rules, the guidelines of a tournament for DFS, daily fantasy sports, fantasy football. And we did tips 1 through 5. Now we're going to knock out tips 6 through 10. Starting with tip number 6. And tip number 6 is, look, we're trying to find value because we are spending a lot of our money at the wide receiver position. So here's the thing. We got to find value. How do you do that? Well, your wide receiver 3 position, typically what I'm looking for is the cheapest starting wide receiver 1 against the worst passing offense. So, who allows the most fantasy points to wide receivers? Who's the cheapest wide receiver 1? And that's going to be a buying opportunity for me. So I'm strictly playing matchups and value. I'm doing that with my tight end as well. It might be a guy like Scott Chandler going against Arizona. Just giving the example from something I remember last year. But, like Scott Chandler, minimum price. Arizona's historically been one of the worst teams against tight ends in terms of allowing fantasy points. And when somebody like Scott Chandler goes out there and gets 2 touchdowns and everybody wonders why, it's because – look, Arizona stinks against the tight end. So I'm just giving an example of where you can find value. Go for that minimum salary guy or that cheap guy at a wide receiver 3, RB2, or at your tight end position. Tip number 7, don't be afraid to spend up for a stud player coming off a bad matchup, because what that means is a lot of people are not going to be on that guy, and then ownership rates will be low. Also, you're probably getting a little bit of a discount. Maybe he went up against the number 1 run defense last week. Salary dropped. Now the player comes back home. You're getting him at a discount, but the matchup is great because now he's at home against one of the worst run defenses in the league. That very easily can happen. It happens a lot. Somebody like Aaron Rodgers goes to play. Just give an example. Rodgers goes to Detroit, does terrible, has one of his worst games of the season, comes back home, throws 5 touchdowns. You're getting him a little bit of discount because last week's performance is priced into his salary. So just an example of how you can profit from players that had a bad matchup the week before, not necessarily a bad game, but just had a bad matchup, and now you can profit as their salary and their matchup improves the next week. Tip number 8, I'm going cheap on defense because I'm spending so much at the wide receiver spot. Cheap on defense. So what I'm looking at is taking the cheapest defense at home against the worst quarterback. One of the statistics that I look at is the sack percentages allowed. I'll give an example. Last year, Robert Griffin had the highest sack percentage allowed in the league. He's a guy that team sacked more than any other quarterback. So again, that's an opportunity where bad quarterback gets sacked, doesn't know what to do with the ball, tries to run, etc. Passing game's not great. So everything adds up to where, whether you're going against Oakland or Cleveland or Jacksonville or, Washington, just pick on those bad teams, but find the cheap defenses going at home against those bad teams. That's key. Tip number 9, general rule of thumb, tiebreaker is give me guys at home and hopefully playing indoors. So, give me a Falcons kicker at home if he's super cheap. Give me a Falcons, Devontae Freeman, Tevin Coleman, Roddy White, Justin Hardy, just any of these guys. If I can get somebody cheap, my tiebreaker is they're at home, they're in a dome, and hopefully they're in a high-scoring game. So that's just going to be, my tip for kind of an overall tiebreaker type thing. And tip number 10 is kind of the same thing with the defense where I'm looking for a matchup. Give me the cheapest kicker against the toughest defense. And I know that sounds a little bit funny, but look, give me a low-scoring game where it's projected to be 20-17, and hopefully that team is at home. I'm going to hope they're in a dome first, but if they're not, then I'm going to hope they're kicking on turf because we don't have to deal with the elements. So, dome, turf, those are your friends. Look, grass is out there. That's fine, but always look for dome and always look for turf first. I know it sounds crazy, but you never know. Those 3 points, 4 points, 5 points that you get an edge out of your kicker could be the difference between you winning a tournament and coming in second place. That's going to wrap it up for the GOAT system or the guidelines of a tournament for NFL DFS. Hope you enjoyed it. Check out all our videos at rotocurve.com and our Learning Curve series. any sport for DFS that you want to learn how to play, we've got videos for it. And the greatest thing about it, it's all free. Thanks again, guys, for joining us. Stay tuned for more videos.